Happy Tuesday, everyone. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day so far. My name is Andrew Heischman. I'm the lead forecaster here in WW116. So in today's video, we'll be taking a look here at the tropics. We actually have a new disturbance here in the Atlantic Ocean, which we'll get into here in a moment. We'll be taking a look at the Storm Prediction Center side of things because we do have the threat for severe weather, a potential another outbreak going to go on today, across the plains. So stay tuned for that as well. We'll be taking a look at the satellite view to see, what areas are basically, covered by clouds and what areas are, looking quite nice for now. We'll be taking a look at the forecast models in terms of today's severe weather. And then at the end of the video, we'll be taking a look here at the National Weather Service hazards. So basically just warnings, watches, advisories, and so on. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get on into it. So over the last few days, we have had severe weather, across basically the Midwest, moving into the Ohio Valley and the Mid-Atlantic region, as we saw yesterday and the day before with that, the live stream we did. So this low has actually moved off the coast of the United States and actually does have the chance of, developing into something. Now, it's a non-tropical low, basically, just saying it's not really associated with a tropical system. However, we could see development into, a system further down the line. Now, this thing actually has a decent chance of forming, a 50% chance through the next 5 days. It's kind of a 50-50 shot. We're kind of pushing that likely category of this thing forming. And in formation chance through 48 hours, basically just 2 days, has a low 20% chance of forming. But it's generally moving away from the coast. It doesn't really pose too many impacts. There might be some strong winds across the mid-Atlantic here as we're currently talking. But this thing is moving away from the United States, and generally as it moves away, I don't really expect much to happen out of this further down the line. So in terms of the Eastern Pacific, we did have Rick that made landfall yesterday. And it's no longer a tropical system. This thing has diminished over basically the upper elevations of Mexico. Those mountains really can disorganize tropical systems relatively quickly because they do not like that terrain. So in terms of the Eastern Pacific, not much going on here. Same thing for Central Pacific, not much going on here. So we're keeping our eyes now on here in the Atlantic as we do have this disturbance out here. So that's what we're dealing with in terms of the tropics. I'll keep you guys updated on our next video, which will be posted tomorrow. So, in terms of the Storm Prediction Center, we do have a, kind of an enhanced risk for today. Severe threat level 3 out of 5 with the triple threat. We do unfortunately have the threat for tornadoes, wind damage, and large hail today. Across basically the southern plains all the way up to the basically, the central plains as well. Pretty much, kind of a large area here of expected severe weather. Now, we do plan on going live today. I will post a time, on our Twitter, or you guys can, turn on post notifications so you guys can get alerted whenever we do go live today. I usually go live for enhanced risk and higher, in which we do have an effect for today. So in terms of tornadoes, we actually have a 5% chance of tornadoes. Basically every single 25 miles inside of this 5% zone, you have a 5% chance of seeing tornadoes inside of this area. And you kind of have a larger 2% area basically outside of that 5% zone, stretching from basically central Texas all the way up through pretty much central Nebraska here. Every single 25 miles, you do have a 2% chance of seeing tornadoes in that region. So relatively, kind of a large region expected for tornadoes today, because you got to think you can fit a lot of 25-mile boxes inside of here. And every single 25 miles, you have a certain amount of chance, either 2 or 5% chance of seeing a tornado, in which if you add those boxes up, there's a decent chance we could see a tornado today. Definitely cannot be ruled out. So, in terms of wind, we actually do have a 30% significant chance for wind. Basically meaning that, winds can get in excess of 70 miles per hour, potentially with some of these storms. Here, as you can see, like this stretches from basically this, this red area showing 30%. And of course, you have the significant, basically parameter showing here, here in this dashed line, basically showing that, these things could get a little bit more severe. So we do expect, potentially, storms could get up to, maybe, unfortunately, 70 mile per hour winds. You got to think, hurricane force, category 1 is 75 mile per hour winds. We're talking potentially near hurricane force winds with some of these storms here. Here in the 30% significant zone. Of course, we do have a 30% zone outside of this significant area, basically just saying that there's a 30% chance every single 25 miles that you could see, damaging winds at all. And typically for the severe criteria of thunderstorms, damaging winds would be 58 miles per hour or more. So you can generally expect them to be above that wind speed. So we do also have a 15% zone, basically stretching out here from southern Nebraska to central Texas. every single 25 miles, 15% chance of seeing, damaging winds in that zone. And then we do have a 5% zone stretching pretty much from a small sliver here of South Dakota all the way down to pretty much southern Texas here, and this 5% chance for damaging winds. So in terms of hail, we do have a 30% chance for significant hail, basically meaning that we could see hail, potentially some storms 2 inches in diameter or larger here, basically across, Kansas and Oklahoma here. Basically, the central parts of the state. We do have a 30% chance of non-significant hail, basically meaning that we could see, instances of hail 1 inch in diameter or greater in those zones. 15% chance every single 25 miles, 1 inch diameter, hail or greater is possible, 15% chance in that zone. And then, of course, we do have the 5% chance as well, a relatively large chance. So, hail does seem to be, kind of a large threat for today as well. Large hail, extreme damaging winds, and tornadoes. We do have a triple threat for today. So, move on to day 2 now. We do actually have a slight risk effect, basically across the southeast. We do have, this is basically severe threat level 2 out of 5. Now, we do have the chance for tornadoes here as well. We also have a 5% zone, stretching from basically extreme eastern Texas all the way down towards, looks like the Alabama coast. Just shy of the panhandle there in the 5% zone, basically just showing that every single 25 miles, you have a 5% chance of seeing a tornado in that area. And of course, we do have a 2% zone, basically stretching out here from basically central and eastern Texas all the way to the panhandle of Florida. Basically saying that anywhere in this area, you do have the chance for tornadoes. In terms of wind, we do have a 15% chance of, having, severe winds. Like I said, probably 58 miles per hour or more every single 25 miles. You have that 15% chance of seeing those damaging winds. And then you move out, we do have the 5% chance as well, having a little bit of a cut here into eastern Oklahoma and basically western Arkansas. It's a 5% chance of seeing that as well. So in terms of hail, we don't really expect hail for day 2. Today we do expect hail, across the area, or across basically the central Great Plains for today. But tomorrow, we're not really expecting too much hail. So in terms of day 3, we do have, that system generally moving to the east. This is an area of low pressure that's forming as we speak. And generally this thing will be moving to the east as well. We do have a slight risk for severe weather across basically Florida here. This does include Orlando. This does include Tampa and Jacksonville, Florida. And then we go up basically, to the Carolinas here. We do have that slight risk in effect basically for the eastern parts of the states. And then we do have a marginal risk here, across a lot of the southeast here, stretching from pretty much Alabama, pretty much all the way up to North Carolina here inside of this marginal zone. Now, we don't have a breakdown exactly of, what we can expect for those days. But a cold front is expected to move through the area, and likely, wind damage will be a concern. Honestly, probably even, a tornado or two cannot be ruled out for this day. So that's basically what we're dealing with in terms of the severe weather. Now let's go and take a look here at the satellite view. Across the nation, relatively clear, across basically the central Great Plains, but that's probably going to change as we get those storms later on today. Across the southeast, it's relatively clear as well, as you can see. It looks like a lot of our clouds are up here in the northeast as this system, this basically area of low pressure, is moving off the coast of the mid-Atlantic. This was the previous driver for all the severe weather that we saw. And we move to the northwest. We do have, a lot of cloud cover over here, especially over western Colorado, moving into Wyoming and into Montana here. We do have a decent amount of cloud cover. Same thing for the Dakotas, relatively cloudy, for the majority of both the states. We move into Minnesota, it's kind of same thing, but generally across the central Great Plains, moving into the southeast, it's relatively clear. It looks like we might have, so this might be fog or this might be some clouds here. It's kind of hard to tell right now, but we'll be paying attention to that whenever the sun comes up. You can see it hasn't scanned across yet, but generally this is probably being obscured by some type of, poor visibility in terms of clouds maybe. So that's basically what we're dealing with in terms of these satellites. Now let's go and take a look here at the forecast model. So generally we do have a low that's expected to form here across the Rockies, move to the east here, in which we can actually see form right there. This is our area of low pressure. This will be the main driver for all the severe weather today. So basically we'll get some air coming up, basically tropical and moisture-filled air moving up to the north here from the Gulf of Mexico, fueling this thing with, relatively, warm dew points. We're talking in the 60s, in which we'll get into here in a moment. And then we got that cooler air pushing behind it, and acts as a cold front, in which, will potentially cause some, severe thunderstorms, across the region. So this system will generally move to the east, as you can see here, basically moving across the southeast, bringing that severe weather threat along with it. Across the southeast here, and moving it eventually into, near Florida and into the Carolinas. Relatively strong area of low pressure. The NAM is showing a 994 millibar zone here, basically across the Mid-Atlantic here. It's actually relatively strong in terms of that. So let's go and take a look here in the terms of basically dew points. So for thunderstorms, you do need dews. You do need you need dew points. You need high dew points. 60s and 70s is typical range. You need instability and you need shear, which shear is just basically winds at different elevations. But yeah, we're looking at dews here, relatively in the 60s. Basically mid to upper 60s. Across the areas of Kansas, moving into Oklahoma. We actually do have dews in basically in excess of 70 here. In bits of the southern and basically eastern side of Texas. So basically we do have that tropical air moving into basically the Great Plains here, and then that area of low pressure basically will be moving across the east, bringing the cold air behind it, pushing it out, as you can see, eventually moving up to the basically southwest. You can see you're drawing those dew points here as well. There's relatively high dew points, but you can see basically that low right here track pretty much to the east. So that's what we're dealing with there. So let's go and take a look here at supercell composite. I like to use this because it really shows kind of a quick area of basically seeing where we could see basically the mixed ingredients between shear and instability, which is needed for thunderstorms. So in terms of thunderstorms when they're expected to fire off, probably maybe later this afternoon into the evening hours, in which we do plan on going live. Like I said, I'll leave an update when we actually do decide to go live here, but we'll go ahead and take a sounding here for basically, central Kansas here. We'll take one here for central Oklahoma, and then we'll take one here for basically central Texas as well, in terms and see what we're doing with here. So it looks like we do have a cap in place, so thunderstorms would have a hard time if they could even form at all in this sounding. It's not contaminated, which is good. It means that the sounding is in the right spot, but wind shear is there, but it's kind of in a weird shape. This hodograph is doing something kind of weird in terms of shear here. But shear in general is relatively strong. It's just that the way that it's blowing is kind of strange. So we do have dews here in the mid, or basically the lower 60s, which is well supported. We do have low precipitable water, as well as our basically wet bulb zero temperature above 700 millibars. So basically what that means is that we could see some instances of small hailers here across basically central Kansas. We do have a little bit more instability along that area as well, in dry atmosphere, which can support instances of hail in terms of that. D-Cape basically showing 983, so that basically shows that we can have some damaging winds with some of these storms. Here today, across the area, which we did see in the Storm Prediction Center's outlook. In instability terms, we're looking at near 1,500 joules per kilogram, which that's enough to get the job done. Anything really over 1,000 is enough to get it done. So we move into, I believe this is Oklahoma. We do have a slight varying wind shear pattern here. Hooking hodograph, kind of a strange shear pattern here, but a tornado or two can form out of this. It does look like our wet bulb zero temperature is a little bit higher. Precipitable water is also a little bit higher, but I still believe that there could still be the chance for hail across this region as well. Dews in the upper 60s, relatively good. Relatively, somewhat dry atmosphere here in the mid-levels, as well as a lot of instability. You can see right in here, basically with the dry mid-levels and the instability, that can support instances of hail. So in terms of D-Cape, we're looking over 1,000 joules per kilogram. So honestly, we could see some instances of damaging winds in excess of 70 miles per hour in the sounding. So relatively strong. So the triple threat, for severe weather, I do generally expect for this sounding alone. So then we move on to this sounding. We do have a very strong cap in place, which I don't really believe that storms would be able to fire here. Storms might have an issue firing, with this cap here in place. But we do have, a varying wind shear pattern. Shear's a little bit more on the weaker side in terms of this sounding. However, maybe a weak tornado, an isolated tornado or two cannot be ruled out. Mixed layer cape, pushing near 1,500, enough to get the job done. We're looking at dews here in the upper 60s, almost in the 70s here. Downdraft cape or downwards cape here, and basically D cape, is showing, around 755. That's enough to get some damaging winds, probably 60 to 70 miles per hour in the zone. So, relatively dry here in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, which, is kind of needed for hail and stuff. So I think that's definitely possible here as well. So that's basically what we're dealing with in terms of that. Let's go and take a look here at instability in terms of things, basically measuring in mean layer cape. So this thing does look like it's gonna, really kick off, around kind of like the late tonight. This is whenever the storms look like it's really gonna kick off. So, but generally, we're looking at instability values here, basically across Ohio. Sorry, that's not Ohio. That's Oklahoma. Basically over Oklahoma and Kansas here. We're looking around 1,700 joules per kilogram and higher. That's enough to get the job done by at least 2 times. Really anything over 1,000 joules per kilogram is considered good enough. So definitely there is enough instability in store for today. Those dew points we saw basically in the pretty much in the mid 60s to upper 60s, and some instances of lower 70s. In some areas, that can definitely vary locally. So yeah, it looks like we do have a decent amount of instability in store for today. We have good dew points. We have good instability. Shear side of things, we do have that area of low pressure that will be forming, in which typically areas of low pressure, they can support some cyclone-induced tornadoes. So shear, it looks like it's going to be in the good for today. Even though some of those sound leads were kind of showing some weird photographs and stuff, I do believe we could see a few tornadoes today. Definitely in store for that. So that's what we're dealing with in terms of NAM. Let's go and take a look here at NamNest in terms of instability. We're going to change our sector here to the southern Great Plains. So in terms of instability, it looks like we will see instability values kind of in the same ballpark region. Kind of pushing near near 2,000 joules per kilogram in some areas. It looks like we might be reaching upwards of near 2,500 across basically southern Kansas here into the panhandle of Oklahoma. And then basically this just stretches down, but it looks like there is a kind of a moderate cap in effect. Basically, this could help, this could help prevent thunderstorms from forming at all. Throughout the region, as it kind of pushes down on your thunderstorms that are trying to form, which can kind of block them out sometimes. So thunderstorms might have a hard time firing off. In which later on today, if later on tonight, is generally whenever this storm mode is expected to fire off. So I'm going to take a look here at HRRR in terms of, same thing, kind of instability. We're looking generally throughout a mix of the models. We're kind of looking around, 2,000 joules per kilogram, around 1,500 to 2,000 in terms of that. In terms of storm mode, like what type of, storms we are expecting. So it looks like that they are going to, kind of start out, more discrete, multicellular here in, patched areas. And it does look like it's going to form into a QLCS, which is basically just a quasi-linear convective system. Basically just pretty much a squall line, basically just a long line of storms. That will be generally moving, across the area. And you can see that area of low pressure forming, basically moving east here. Right there, this is where your area of low pressure is. And it's basically driving this cold front, across, the southern Great Plains and eventually into the southeast, bringing the severe weather along with it. So that's what we're dealing with in terms of the models for today. Now let's go and take a look here at the hazards issued by the National Weather Service. So we're going to look here at the non-precipitation side of things. We do have red flag warnings here in effect for basically eastern Colorado, the northern panhandle of Texas, the panhandle of Oklahoma, basically western Kansas here, there's one county here basically in extreme southwestern Nebraska. Red flag warning in effect basically means that we do have the threat for wildfires in this area, so be monitoring that. We do have dense fog advisories here, along the coast of Texas, stretching all the way to Louisiana. Basically, dense fog means that poor visibilities are expected with dense fog, usually meaning that cloud cover at the surface. Basically, that's what fog is. It's just clouds at the surface can basically obscure view. Basically this could be really hazardous for travel and stuff too. Especially people going to work. Especially this early. I mean, it's only 7:30. People going to work in this, and it can be kind of disruptive in terms of that. So we do have high wind warnings here in effect. It looks like for bits of New Mexico, as well as we do have an area of high wind warnings here, basically across northwestern Montana. Basically meaning that high winds are expected in those areas. We do have high wind watches here in effect for western Nebraska, northeastern Colorado, and it looks like southeastern Wyoming. We do have that high wind watch in effect. Basically means that the conditions could reach high wind warning criteria, which basically means that there is high winds expected still, but generally kind of under the high wind warning criteria. But that could change further down the line, so just be aware of that. We do have wind advisories here, stretching across actually my local area. I'm actually in a wind advisory for today, stretching basically in Maryland, bits of northeastern West Virginia, shooting basically through northern and western Virginia, Stretching all the way down to western North Carolina, we do also have wind advisories in effect basically here for the eastern Dakotas. We do have an area right here as well. Actually stretching into Minnesota as well, and we do have some more wind advisories here in effect for basically bits of western Texas into New Mexico and eventually into Arizona as well, eastern Arizona. So that's what we're dealing with in terms of the non-precipitation side of things. So we do have the winter weather advisories here. We're going to move on to the winter side of things. We do have winter weather advisories here in effect for Utah, Wyoming, and bits of Colorado here. This is mostly for the upper elevations. You can see right here in the light blue. Basically, across this area, we could see some winter weather, which can cause some disruptions in travel. But I'm sure that they're used to this weather by now. So it's really nothing too significant for them because, like I said, I'm sure that they've probably dealt with much worse, case scenarios. But yeah, generally what winter weather advisories means is that a few inches of snow can be possible. I'm not exactly sure how much snow is expected for these areas, but generally means that winter weather is on its way. So we do have flash flood warnings in effect here for New Jersey. You can actually see here, in basically bits of the northeast here. We do have basically flood watches in effect for basically bits of Pennsylvania, New York, and into Massachusetts here. Basically meaning that flooding can be possible. Especially with locally heavy rainfall. With the system that we've seen, deliver even some floods here locally. I was under a flood warning yesterday. This is generally moving to the northeast, but the low is moving off the United States coast. And then lastly, we do have some flood warnings here in effect for basically bits of Indiana. We do have one for basically bits of extreme northwestern Ohio. And we do have some here in Illinois. It does look like we do have another flood warning in effect for bits of southern Louisiana. So that's going to do it for today's video. If you guys did enjoy it, make sure you do leave a thumbs up. It'd be greatly appreciated. Anyways, guys, my name is Andrew Heischen. I'm the lead forecaster here in WW116, and I hope everyone has a wonderful Tuesday.